Hey everybody, welcome back to the I Believe podcast. Today I'm joined with Sam Franklin, all the way across the pond, so to speak. He's hailing from, I believe you're in London, or just generally the UK?
Yeah, just outside London. Yep.
Okay. So lucky him, it's not quite as early as it is over here. But Sam, we're so excited to have you on the podcast today, and I'm so grateful to you for reaching out and just being willing to be a guest. And tell us your story about, where you have traveled within your uveal melanoma diagnosis. So, Sam, do you want to go ahead and just give us kind of the rundown from the beginning to where you are now?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I was diagnosed actually all the way back in 2011. The doctors thought I had a detached retina. And they said, hey, go home, keep your head really still, and hopefully we'll save your vision. So my mum wasn't having any of that, and she whizzed me down to another doctor who said, you do have a detached retina, but actually it's cancer. And it was so rare back then that they brought lots of other doctors in to show to show them what it looked like. So I started this whole cancer journey as a sort of teaching subject for people. But they removed my eye fairly quickly back in 2011. And I thought I was done with all of this until sadly the disease metastasized first in 2019. And then since then I've been battling it with various different treatments and surgeries and different options. And up until recently, I was taking part in a clinical trial, although sadly that clinical trial hasn't worked. I think now we're at a stage where we've unfortunately exhausted all of the treatment options, and so I'm really focusing on spending the time with the family now. But we've given it a good go. Interesting to share some of those things of how the last sort of 15 years or so have been.
Yeah, and I think it's so unique. I didn't realize how long ago you were initially diagnosed. So I know when we initially talked on Instagram, we had talked about having you chat about this concept of like living in the long middle, that space in our stage 4 diagnosis where you're not cured, right? We know that. And I think you mentioned something
Yeah.
about your wife and getting the initial metastatic diagnosis of them telling you like, it's not curable. And you're like, gee, thanks. Like, no duh. But how has that kind of space that you've lived in over the last, I'm trying to do the math, 15 years since you were initially
Yeah.
diagnosed? How's that space of like living in that middle space? Because even when you didn't have metastatic disease, I assume you still had scans and it was still on your mind.
Yes, and so when I was first diagnosed, and they removed my eye, they said, well, the chance of it coming back is small, and whether I remember that correctly or not, I'm not sure. But then they said, well, after 5 years if it hasn't come back, your chance of it coming back is really small. And mine spread after 8 years. And so in that first period of time, I was living really 3 months to 3 months in the scans, and then when it moved to 6 monthly scans, you're like, hey, I've got a bit of a bigger window here. And I think, in a way, that long window before the disease metastasized gave me some sort of coping strategy of how it's been after that. Because, I was living scan to scan and not looking too far ahead. But each one was a good scan, fortunately. So you get a little bit more relaxed. So by the time it came to the metastatic diagnosis, and as you mentioned, my wife was heavily pregnant with our daughter, and the doctor said to us, it's spread and the disease is incurable. And whilst that's true, it's not what an expectant mother and father expecting their first child want to hear. I certainly felt that it was a shock, but also I didn't realise then, I guess, that I'd still be here nearly 7 years later, because the doctor painted such a bleak picture.
Well, I think it's one of those unique things where, 7 years ago, if you went on the internet and searched, prognosis for a metastatic uveal melanoma patient, it did look a lot more grim, right? And I think it's only
Absolutely.
recently, maybe because of the rise of the internet, maybe because, of a combination of that and like we're just connecting more with each other. So we're finding more people across the world with uveal melanoma. But I think, the other key part of that is that treatments have advanced and we do have trials that continue to prolong life. And we have treatments now like that are more approved treatments. Like I think in the UK, there's also Kimtrack and the chemosat, which obviously like is unique circumstances where that will fit as far as the treatment scope goes.
Yeah.
But the fact that we have more options, sort of, I say that with a grain of salt, than we did 7-8 years ago, it does shape the picture that we see more patients experiencing, and I find a lot of hope in that personally. Being kind of smack dab in the middle of that timeline myself, I'm at, man, what am I at? 4 years, I think. I can't even do the math. Yeah, 4 years
Yeah.
metastatic this month. I'm like, I don't know. But I'm like 6 years from my primary diagnosis, and like to me that feels insane. That feels like a really long time. Like that's my whole child's life, my 6-year-old.
Yes.
And
So,
I just find it incredible.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but yeah, no, absolutely. And when we met with the with my oncologist just recently for the sort of final appointment, which was very strange. It was essentially an appointment for him to say bye because we'd already had a Zoom and yeah, and the news hadn't changed. Um, we reflected on the fact he's a different oncologist than we had for the initial metastatic diagnosis, but we reflected on the fact that 5 years ago, 6 years ago, most of the treatments that I've had weren't available or weren't readily available then. Um, and the trial I've just taken part of, no one had ever even thought of 5 years ago. And whilst he didn't say we will have cured this in 5 years, the sort of reflection from him was in 5 years it'll be a different picture again. Sadly, many of us as patients just fall at the wrong time, and this the way this disease behaves, 5 years down the line may or may not be too far away.
Yeah.
But it was when I agreed to do this podcast and talking about the long middle, it was really to share some of those reflections on how those 5 or 6 years have been.
Yeah. So in the 5 or 6 years, like where you have been metastatic and just, I mean, I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like I get to that year mark of where I'm at in the metastatic journey, and I'm like, wow, another year. Like it's already been a year. Um, Sometimes it feels like that year is horrible and hard, and other times it feels like it goes so fast that I feel like I just blinked. Um, when you have been in that space, like, did you ever find, I guess, kind of a tension between like feeling grateful for your own response or your own kind of disease, what do you call it, behavior, maybe like the way that your cancer behaved, and like the weight of knowing that there were other people in the community, who don't have the same outcome?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I had chemosaturation therapy, Delcath, in Southampton, which is one of the leading centres and well treated by the team down there. And whilst I was there, other OMEs were being treated down there as well. And sadly, at least two of them, but two that I got to know through social media and through being there at the same time, passed away. They're no longer with us. And I did feel a huge burden of survivor guilt. Why should my treatment be successful and theirs isn't? Um, and whilst there's been other people in that, along the way through Instagram and through social media, because I'd seen them in person, that took them from just being a name on Instagram or someone that we'd shared a few voice notes with, who, someone we both shared a complaint about the quality of coffee in the hospital, and then to see the message that each of them had passed away far beyond their time, far before their time, right, far too young, was really hard. I found that very difficult. And just last week, another patient from the trial, so 2 weeks ago, a patient from the trial passed away as well. And although I'm in the same place as her, the trial hasn't worked to run out of options, I found it incomprehensible that she could be dead because I'm still alive. And so both the guilt bit, but also the complete sort of mental struggle with that of how can I still be alive, but she's not.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the most we've got a beautiful community where I've learnt about treatments before the doctors have even offered them up from people on Instagram and Facebook and this community of people that share knowledge. But then you get to know the people, and sadly, no one's in that community for fun.
Aura Biosciences is a clinical stage biotechnology company focused on developing precision therapies for solid tumors that aim to preserve organ function. Our lead candidate, Belsar, is currently in late stage development for primary choroidal melanoma and in early stage development in other ocular oncology indications and bladder cancer. Our mission is to grow as an innovative global oncology company that positively transforms the lives of patients. For more information, please visit us at aurabiosciences.com.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sam, thank you so much for sharing that. I can relate a lot. The people that I've met in person, I definitely have felt a much stronger link. Just a bigger connection. So in the last, 5-6 years that you've dealt with your metastatic diagnosis, you've got 2 little kids. You said that your first was almost to their original birthday when you were initially diagnosed metastatic. Where do you feel like you were able to kind of find space for life to be as normal as possible, as a young family?
I think because of that sort of regular 3-month scan thing, I've so people have said to me recently, "Oh, you're so strong," or "You deal with this so well, and don't know how to deal with it." And I don't feel that I'm strong or particularly dealing with it well. I think I've developed this helpful or unhelpful coping mechanism of I take the cancer and I put it in a box and it goes up on the shelf. And that box gets opened periodically at appointments or scans or once a week at my therapy appointment. But then the rest of the time it goes back in the box up on the shelf. And that's how I've been able to work up, all the way up until recently. I've worked all the way through the cancer stuff and my work identity hasn't been about cancer. Now, some of my colleagues might disagree about that because one of my coping mechanisms is making inappropriate jokes. And so I have made jokes about it to try and get out of doing things I don't want to do at work. But in reality, I've worked regardless of the cancer. I'll come back to the kids and the family because that's the most important in a minute. But I've done other things. I took a voluntary role at the local synagogue, where I was the chair for a couple of years and did other stuff in the community before that. We had a project to try and open a new school. And I've done all of that not because of the cancer, and not even in spite of the cancer. For me, the cancer was something that lived over there, and I'd have to deal with it every so often. But maybe because it's just too much. But I left that over there. And then having young children, so my daughter Ariella is 6, my son is 4. It's nearly his 5th birthday. We're super excited about that, and I'm looking forward to all the celebrations. But having those 2 is just a humongous distraction as well because kids just still want to play and still have fun. So focusing on them has been one of the huge things that sort of gets you up each day, or gets me up each day and gets me through. And then I have an incredibly supportive wife who, whilst I've been putting it up on the shelf and living in the long middle, there's probably a whole other podcasting series about the grieving spouses who have to go through this period of long grief because whilst I'm focusing on living, they're coming to terms with the fact that we're actually dying.
Man. I think you mentioned you went to therapy today. I can tell. I too make inappropriate jokes.
Yes. And having the therapy before this was good because it then helped me to crystallize what I wanted to say today.
Feel like, okay, what do I want to share?
Yes.
Well, and I know I get told, many cancer patients, we get told that phrase of like, oh, you're so strong, right? From people outside looking in. And as cancer patients, I think it feels a little bit more like we just don't have any other choice, right? It's show up or not. Like those are the options. Like it's not so much about strength. Sometimes, at least I think that we kind of talk ourselves out of that. But I do want to just, I guess, applaud you. Maybe not for strength, but just for your resilience, like as a person. And like I can see that in the way that you talk about your diagnosis, in the way that you talk about, you know, where you're at now with reaching the end of treatment options and reaching this point where presence and you know, the one day at a time is literally all you have to focus on. I absolutely admire the person that you are.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And you know, I touched on it there, but I've taken the decision, and you know, there's lots of others who, it's not my phrase really, but yeah, I've taken this decision to focus on living. I can't remember if I said it here, but you know, I know I'm dying, but I'm not dead.
Yeah.
And until I'm dead, I'm going to keep focusing on living. And I think that's why I'm not particularly. I've never been dead before, so I don't know what it will feel like. but I'm not particularly scared of it, because it feels like it's something that's going to happen at some point, you know, and I'm not going to have much control of it. But ultimately, we are all dying at some point, some coming sooner than others. But until then, you know, I plan to just keep getting up each day and enjoying the day. And I never wanted to have cancer with young kids, of course not. And I'm not saying there's a good way of having it or a bad way of having it, but the young kids still need you to get up in the morning, and yeah, they still want to come jump on the bed or whatever they want to do. And so, whilst they've been complete angels and adjusted to the last 3 months where I was really poorly on the trial, they still force you, even just mentally, to get out of bed for a little bit and read them a story or do some Lego with them or things like that. And I think that helps with the strength, because I'm not being strong for me. I'm sort of dragging myself forward to be there for them. And I think that's what's helped a lot over the last 6 years.
I was actually just about to ask you, like, where do you feel like you draw strength from the most? And it sounds like family and, you know, your kids and your wife is a big piece of that. But I guess my other part to that question is, you mentioned a synagogue. Like, do you have any level of like spiritual or religious beliefs that you feel like you've been able to lean on?
I think at different times, yes. Today, I don't know. And I don't mean that today as in this long period. I mean today as in the 8th of May. Yeah, because it does feel like it wanes. You know. My initial diagnosis came just before the Jewish New Year. And in the text that we read on the Jewish New Year, and on the Day of Atonement, it says that God will decide who will live and who will die. And that really resonated with me, because I was about to have a major operation to have my eye removed. In fact, I delayed the operation till just after the Day of Atonement, because I felt like I needed to give it everything I could. And because of the scan cycles being 3 months or 6 months, the metastatic diagnosis landed similar time in 2019. So that has always felt a real pinch point for me. The last 2 years, going to the synagogue around that time, I found extremely difficult. I found very much like, if a God exists, I felt like I was, there begging for a different answer, or for a positive answer. But then I look at my kids, and I think actually they're great. And if it's been decided that I've used up my time down here, that really sucks. But we've given them a strong foundation. Every parent says their kids are awesome, right? But mine are awesome. And I think we've given them a strong foundation for moving forward.
Castle Biosciences is a proud sponsor of this I Believe podcast. Castle's innovative uveal melanoma tests provide valuable information about the risk of your eye cancer spreading to help you and your healthcare team individualize the management of your disease. To learn more, visit castlebiosciences.com.
I think it's one of those tricky spots, I think, throughout diagnosis where, I watch some people online in the community, people who I know in person, who they lean heavily, right? Heavily on a level of like spiritual belief, and they find a lot of comfort in that. But I think that there's also a very real percentage of the community who feel a lot like you, Sam, like who feel like, okay, I had this belief system and then I got cancer. Now I'm trying to make sense of how do those fit together, and do they even fit together? And I appreciate the candor that you shared, that like some days it doesn't. Like today is a day that you're not so sure. And I think that is really just really validating to so many of us in the community who struggle to make sense of, why does it feel like this person's prayers are getting answered when mine are not? I think that what you said gives a lot of room for the empathy of that space.
And I think I've sort of landed in that position because I've been having to have some really tough conversations with both kids. So both kids are to their own level, but aware of where we are in my diagnosis. Both have asked, has the medicine stopped working, or is the medicine working? We've told them it stopped working, and so they've come to understand that means I'm dying, and that means different things to both of them. But that obviously leads to lots of other questions and lots of questions around faith. So having to yesterday sit and talk to your 4-year-old about this, and then today write the first half of the stack of birthday cards for my daughter for birthdays that I won't be there for. I'm not feeling as close to faith in God as maybe I was yesterday morning when my son had a beautiful assembly at school. I saw him on the stage and he was joining in with all of the prayers, and all of the kids were, and it was lovely, and that felt a bit more spiritual than organized prayer perhaps does, or things like that. But I think everyone's got their own space in that journey as well.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate your thoughts. Sorry, I'm just the waterworks here.
Just for everyone else on the podcast, based on time difference, I've already used up 1.5 boxes of tissues today. So, Tanette's got some catching up to do.
And here's me with, 3 pieces of tissue over here trying to make it last. No, so Sam, I appreciate just I don't know if you feel, do you feel, let me rephrase that. I feel like if I try to put myself in your shoes, which is obviously a pretty challenging, painful, triggering kind of a thing to do as a young parent myself, who's also got metastatic disease. Do you feel like, I don't know, like you're kind of going a little bit, I just feel like I would go a little bit insane, like trying to make sense of where, okay, like today I just did this, and also like, but I'm okay today.
It's a very strange feeling because first of all, I was certain that I was going to beat this thing, and I only said that out loud recently in regard to after this trial, but I genuinely believed that the trial that I was on was going to be for the drug that was going to cure cancer. And I don't know if I'd psyched myself up for that, or I don't know if I was delusional because I'd tried so many other things. But someone had to be the first patient to have chemotherapy or radiotherapy or Kimtrack or any of those things. So I was like, hey, why can't I be one of the first patients? to have the next breakthrough thing that was going to solve cure the disease. And so there was a little bit of shock of that, but the doctor says to me, "Hey, we've run out of all options, and you've been pretty sick on the trial for the last 3 months. Our advice is use the time you've got to make memories." But I feel tired. I'm a bit sad that my beard hasn't grown back, but I never had a lot of head hair to start with. Other than that, I was at the gym this morning. We're going away on Monday with the kids. It feels really strange that I'm dying, but I don't really feel like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I expected that as soon as they told me I'd feel really ill. But my brain can't quite catch up with hey, you're dying. And so whilst I'm trying to do all what I'm calling deadmin, the sort of the admin of dying, changing the bills over into my wife's name, or sorting out she's put on the list that I need to tidy up the loft space. There's a lot of stuff I've got to do on this list, but I can't really get psyched to do it because it doesn't. Well, I've got ages, right? Because I'm still here. I still feel fine. I feel a bit tired. Sometimes I feel a bit nauseous, but overall, I feel good. I think the sad thing is we've seen in the community when it gets right to the very end seems to be quite quick. Mm-hmm. Hence me motivating myself to do the cards for the kids and things like that, which are more important. But it's a real challenging space to not even to accept I'm dying, because I've had my long middle. And I still think, still half thinking I'm sort of at the end of the middle. I'm not in the end yet, but I'm at the end. Throughout that process that this is a disease that they don't have a cure for yet. And so trying to balance those two things, I think, is one of the big challenges of living with this horrible disease, because ultimately the end's coming, you just don't quite know when.
Well, just to wrap, Sam, I wanted to give you an opportunity just to share, I guess maybe two tidbits. One, what would you say to somebody who's brand new diagnosed, especially somebody who maybe is a younger father, or father to be, and just in that kind of family space? What would you say to somebody like you who it's 27, they just found out they gotta have their eye enucleated?
I'd split what I'd say to them into two parts. I haven't not been able to do anything I wanted to do because I had my eye removed. So I had this fear of how my life was going to change from it. I still had a flying lesson. I've still, my wife and I backpacked around South America. We've still just got on with, still scuba dived. I've done all of those things that I wanted to do beforehand with one eye. So the enucleation itself shouldn't hold you back. I will never win a tennis tournament, but I was never going to win a tennis tournament beforehand. But I reckon if you were really determined and you trained your brain, you still could. So one hand would be, your life's not over from having your eye enucleated. And back in 2011, there wasn't anyone that said that to me. And it took a while for me to realize that I could pick myself up and still drive and still do all of those basic things as well. And all my friends prefer me to pour alcohol shots because I've got no depth perception, so you get a bigger drink. And then the other part of it is the doctors are fantastic, but they only know what they know. And the fantastic community that's out there enables us to have access to different treatments around the world, or information about different treatments. So we've often gone to the doctor and said, "Hey, what about this?" And he said, "Well, that doesn't work because of this," or doing something else might be better for you. And then the third part of that is you can only deal with what's immediately in front of you. So maybe I could, I couldn't do a particular other treatment because I'd done Delcath. Okay, but I didn't know about the other treatment, and Delcath gave me 18 months. So you can only deal with what's in front of you with the information that you've got, and there's no point sort of second guessing yourself, because I think you drive yourself crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I feel like you just went right into the next piece of that of like, what would you
Sorry.
say to somebody metastatic? No, it's fine. It flowed really
Oh,
well.
yeah,
So
okay, yeah, link the whole together. And
it's
I
okay
think I
if
didn't
there's anything
realize,
else.
I just don't think I realized in 2011 to even worry about the metastatic. And maybe that's because I don't know, I was 20 something, 23. No, it was 23. I didn't think about metastatic disease and it spreading to my liver. I knew they were going to remove my eye. I wasn't going to get my vision back in it because it'd already gone blurry, and that I was going to have regular scans afterwards. But I don't think I ever really understood. Well, not understood. I don't think I ever really paused to think, what does that mean at the time? And maybe I'd have done more research, and we would have been more armed with what to do when it did metastasize. Although I focused on living my life for those 8 years, which maybe it's better than spending your time searching for different treatment options.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the level of just presence and life that you've been able to, muster from the point of your initial diagnosis to where you are now is incredible. It's not, it's one of those, I feel like it's one of those hard things, right? Where, yes, it's incredible that you made it this far, and it still absolutely sucks to be where you're at.
Yes.
Like both things are true, and that dichotomy is such a tricky thing to hold space for yourself, for other people to hold space for that. But I admire just the way that you have lived and lived well, like while you've been in that long middle. Even if the end came, the end point of that journey came sooner than you expected.
Thank you. No, and thank you for everything you do to continue to raise awareness and to help people with this really rubbish disease. Yeah. And thank you for the time on the podcast, and I wish you all the very best in all of your treatments and scans and everything that you've got coming up as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Sam, I do have one final question I just thought of, if you've got like a minute or two.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
If you've got just a minute, where do you hope this disease will be, in 10 years, 15 years? Like just, or just in the future? What do you hope for other patients, I guess?
I think there's fantastic advancements in the treatment options. I saw something really cool recently about they've worked on a mouse model of how the disease progressed that more mirrors it. The problem with our disease is the branding, right? Everyone just thinks we're a form of skin cancer. So we need to ditch the melanoma tag, and then people will focus more on the uveal part. And I think science is really close to understanding. We've seen with Kimtrack that's doing good things. There's a couple of other drugs that are just finishing their trials that are positive results coming out from. So in 5 years, I'd hope that at a minimum this disease was something that was manageable, whether or not cured, but you could be on long-term drugs that keep it at bay. And then as we reach out further to 10 years, I'd love for it to be like some of the other cancers out there where they know what to do and it's cured. I think what would be even more incredible would be to understand how this forms and to work out how to prevent it happening to start with. And one of the things that I've asked every oncologist we've seen recently is, how do I know that the kids don't have this? And all of their answers have been, well, we don't think that it passes on like that. But in 5 years, I hope they answer that they know how the disease progresses and they know how the disease passes on to people or doesn't pass on, so that even if you do sadly get it, they know how to make sure that it's not something that gets passed on to children, or that children are at greater risk from their parents having the cancer.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for being a guest here on the I Believe podcast and for just honoring our community with your story, with the wisdom that you have to share, and really just taking the time out of the days that you have right now to be present, and to be present here, and to, I think, just offer the gift of what you had to share with the rest of the ocular melanoma community. I can't thank you enough for participating and just honoring me with being the person to talk to.
Thank you. It's been an absolute honour and pleasure to be part of this, to share the story, and hopefully to help some others along the journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in addition to that, I want to just say thank you so much to our sponsors for the podcast and our YouTube channel, of whom which we would not be able to, host the podcast without their assistance and their help. So with that, I will talk to you guys next time. Send Sam and his family lots of good energy and prayers, and peace, I think. I just know that as much as we can be with you, we're with you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. God bless to you all.
We will talk to you later.
Bye.